It's time to turn back the clock as we take a second look at Little Garden. In an arc focused around honor, it's now time to look at the dishonorable. Those who operate through subterfuge, who deceive and dismay, those who manipulate the honorable for their own ends. It's time to examine the rest of Little Garden, learning more about Vivi's non-Miss Wednesday character, how Zoro still hasn't lost, at least in his eyes, and Sanji being the real MVP. Let's take it all in as we continue to look at the Grandeur of Alabasta. Alright, let's talk about our latest Baroque Works pair, Mr. 3 and Ms Goldenweek. They too are officer agents, and based on Mr. 5 and Ms Valentine's reaction, they're another step up in power. But what really sets the pair apart, at least Mr. 3 apart, is his strategy. If Mr. 5 and Ms Valentine were to show off the raw strength of Baroque Works with simple yet destructive explosion and weight powers to match, Mr. 3 shows us both a different way to use Devil Fruit abilities beyond just punch fighting, and also a glance into the dangers of a, even rather hastily put together plan. If Mr. 3's plan on Little Garden, thrown together in hours, was enough to nearly take out the crew and the giants, how much more dangerous is Crocodile's plan that has been put together and executed for far longer? That aside, let's look a little closer at Mr. 3. His very first scene shows three key features of his character. His pride at being a high-ranking officer of Baroque Works. Despite the organization's secret nature, he's done up his hair to literally reflect his rank. This is further enforced by him being disappointed that Mr. 2 wasn't the one to be killed, and that would allow him a promotion to an even higher rank. This doubly shows Mr. 3's second feature, his callous nature. It also once more shows off the disunity of the Baroque Works members. Mr. 3 doesn't care if Mr. 5 has been killed, and he wishes a fellow organization member was also killed. Then finally, the fact that Mr. 3 is unironically an evil mastermind-style character. We were told that Baroque Works members joined the organization in pursuit of establishing a utopia, at least that's what they are led to believe, and without knowledge of their end goals of taking over Alabasta, those that resided on Whiskey Peak were doing something totally just, at least in the eyes of the One Piece world, hunting pirates. Mr. 3, however, literally calls himself a criminal and talks about possessing the powers of evil. In other words, while other organization members could give themselves plausible deniability for their complicity in Crocodile's evil scheme, Mr. 3, even without knowing Crocodile's plot, is not going to be a good guy, even by his own admission. He's in it for his own gain, and he'll do any evil and criminal thing to further that end. As he meets up with Mr. 5 and Ms Valentine, who aren't dead after all, and are definitely afraid of Mr. 3, the mastermind shows off his knowledge by revealing who Dory and Broggy are with a summary of their history, and then we see his plan being put into action. With Mr. 5's help, the ale given to Dory explodes as he drinks it, causing the giant grave injury. Then he deceives Zoro and Nami with wax figurines and captures them. Then he interferes with the giant's fight to make sure Broggy defeats and presumably kills Dory. Then he finally makes himself known after he's already locked the remaining giant down, laughing all the while. And really, this plan is devastating. He didn't account for Dory trapping Luffy under a giant skull, but that aside, his plan has gone off without a hitch, resulting in the capture of all 5 of his targets. Sure, it may not have worked out in the end, but that's just because this is the Straw Hats we're talking about. Take that variable out, and this hastily put together plan would have been a success. A villain with a plan is a formidable foe to face. Aside from Kuro, who was far too stubborn to even slightly modify his perfect plan, at least Mr. 3 is able to improvise. Now that his plan has reached its climax, Broggy is incapacitated and Vivi, Nami and Zoro are all trapped in Mr. 3's candelabra, I can talk about Zoro. This is another one of those famous examples pointed to when people say, "See, Zoro lost to Mr. 3. And once again, just like with Arlong, I'll say, did he? I'm basically going to repeat what I said back with Zoro quote-unquote losing to Arlong. This is what I was talking about when I was talking about Zoro not losing ever again. Sure, you can look at this situation and say, oh yeah, Zoro's pretty much cooked here, he's totally lost to Mr. 3. Well, tell that to Zoro, he hasn't conceded yet. For Zoro to lose, he has to accept death. So to him, he's still in the middle of the fight. His determination to continue gets the gloating Mr. 3 to shut up and almost ruin his picture-perfect plan because Zoro gets him to believe that, oh no, I need to kill this guy before he escapes. Zoro even inspires Broggy to continue the fight along with him. And best of all, Oda makes sure to show us that he ain't bluffing. He gets halfway through his legs before Luffy bursts out of the forest, in which case Zoro leaves it to Luffy because he trusts his captain to pull through. Even when Mr. Five said that they had taken care of him, Zoro's all like, what? You think you killed Luffy? Hilarious. It's nice to know that Nami's trust in Luffy is also absolute. As soon as Luffy shows up, Nami calms down. The last important thing to note about Zoro is actually at the very end. Despite Zoro doing little more than sleeping during his time between islands, after his apparent failure to destroy the candelabra, Zoro starts training in ridiculous style. Despite his relaxed attitude during the fight, when Zoro is by himself, he shows that he does indeed feel responsible, that if he were stronger, they wouldn't have been delayed. Zoro is a character that feels responsible for the safety of the crew, so this is a bit of a wake-up call to him. Mr. 3 said that his dried wax is as strong as steel, and so Zoro becomes resolved to be strong enough to shatter it. There is a third person stuck with him under the candelabra though, and that person is Vivi. We established in the last part that Little Garden is time for Vivi to learn about the Straw Hat crew and for us to learn about her. We learned that she has a bit of an adventurous streak to her, and that she didn't understand the Giant's Jewel because she's so focused on conflict resolution. Now, up to this point, we're getting a general vibe check on her personality. She's on the smart side, she can recognize the creatures on the island and knows what the giants are. She's also the first to put 2 and 2 together and correctly guesses that Baroque Works are on the island with them. She's concerned about Dory's well-being. She's a little confused about how Luffy is so concerned about Dory, obviously having some preconceived notions about what pirates are. Another similar trait to Nami's first introduction. She gets angry when her friends are hurt, and she can be hot-headed. She correctly chose to flee from Mr. 5 and Ms Valentine back on Whiskey Peak, but after seeing what they've done to Karoo, she goes on the offensive. Also, quick break from Vivi to say that Karoo is really proving himself to just be an excellent companion. I said that him accompanying Vivi into Little Garden despite his fears showed that he cared about her more than he cared about his own safety, and he really proves it in spades when he is ready to sacrifice himself to protect Vivi from the 2 officer agents. So aside from Vivi, we're also learning about Karoo. But back to Vivi, and we find ourselves back at the candelabra, and we see Vivi getting inspired by Zoro. She also volunteers to get her legs chopped off in order to escape and continue fighting, because that's a small price to pay in order to save her kingdom. She was already putting her life on the line, so what's a leg or two? It's emphasizing that Vivi really does put the safety and stability of Alabasta above herself, a point Oda is making sure to hammer home. Then she learns about the crew. Much like how Nami slowly had her perceptions about pirates changed by Luffy, Vivi is also starting to have her perceptions changed. But the first big push is seeing how Zoro and Nami react when Luffy appears. When the 2 of them relax when Luffy appears, Vivi is confused. She doesn't understand the trust they've put in him. Then, as the fight goes on, not out of trust but out of desperation, she also cries out to Luffy to save them. In the end, Luffy, Usopp, and Karoo do manage to save them, and while we don't really get to see a direct reaction to Luffy's success, we do get this lovely panel of her just watching over everyone, sans Sanji, and having a contemplative smile. It's not just the fact that she's gotten through another ordeal, but also no one has blamed her for getting them into this situation. It's the beginning of Vivi beginning to actually trust the crew out of more than just necessity. The next person to talk about is Luffy. He's pretty well established at this point, and the arc doesn't add much new, just reinforces what we already know. He's passionate, he's happy-go-lucky, he's uncompromising, and a bit reckless. We know that he's someone that, if he cares about something, cares about it with 100% of his being, as he gets invested in the fight between Dory and Broggy. We already know that Luffy knows the value of an honorable duel. The respect that he gave to Zoro's fights are evidence of that, but I also think that he cares about Dory, potentially even because he shared a meal with him, something that we learned last arc is an important trust-earning gesture for Luffy. Something new is... how do I put this? Luffy doesn't give a hoot about gods and the divine. This makes sense since Luffy is all about that freedom, and surely couldn't imagine himself having to conform to the rules and restrictions that a religion would put on him. Though it's an important distinction to mention, it's not that Luffy doesn't believe they exist, it's just that he doesn't care if they do. Gods or no, Luffy just wants to do his own thing. Then we get to his fight against Mr. 3 and Miss Goldenweek. Once more, it's classic Luffy, a creative and carefree fighting style. A little bit of reckless disregard for Broggy very much reminds me of when he throws Zoro into the air during the Arlong fight, and check out this excellent panel of Broggy crying out in pain but half his face is frozen in wax. It seems like that even against the fourth most powerful of Baroque Works, Luffy's able to hold his own, until Miss Goldenweek shows up. And holy hell, she is terrifying. First, important to note, she is not using a Devil Fruit ability. Her Colors Trap is a form of hypnotism. It's our first officer agent who doesn't have a Devil Fruit ability, so it informs us that not all of the officer agents will necessarily have them. It's also another expansion on what non-Devil Fruit abilities can exist. Django's hypnotism was pretty wild, but the Colors Trap technique is even crazier. Her ability is dangerously powerful against someone like Luffy though, someone who acts instinctively and often emotionally, and this ability manipulates emotions. Its effectiveness is not out of the blue either. Just as Luffy was easily hypnotized when up against Django and the Black Cat pirates, hypnotism works just as well against him here. What's truly awful is the fact that Luffy seems to know that he's hypnotized, but he's just completely powerless to go against it. The panel where he's trying to fight against the calming green paint, sweating and gritting his teeth, but he just simply can't. The fight is mostly played for comedy, but it really is showing a huge weakness in Luffy. Miss Goldenweek doesn't show up again after Little Garden, sans a cover story, and thank goodness for that. Imagine if Luffy didn't have Usopp to bail him out. Thankfully, Oda makes sure to show, as he did back with Laboon, that Luffy's nature to act purely on instinct and emotion isn't just a weakness. As the fight progresses and Luffy chases Mr. 3 into the forest and goes up against Mr. 3's Wax Wax mansion, it is indeed instinct which gets him through it unscathed. Yes, Luffy may need to learn to think things through a bit better, to be a bit more considerate, but sometimes the right course of action is simply the one that Luffy instinctually thinks is best. Finally, let's briefly touch on Usopp. Not for too long though, since he got a whole episode last part. Perhaps the biggest thing to note is, wow, Usopp can take some damage. We've seen him tank some massive hits before, but he gets decimated by an explosion and gets literally buried by a 10-ton blow. Usopp's supposed to be one of the weakest crew members, but his resilience is top-notch. Then, when he joins the fight, it is his plan that ends up rescuing the crew. In classic Usopp fashion, though he may not look pretty while doing it, may end up taking some hits, and it may even be a bit underhanded in its execution, but through any means that he can, Usopp will get that win. So, what has Sanji been doing all this time? He's been busy working hard to earn his MVP spot this arc, that's what. As he chances across Mr. 3's wax house, he answers the Den Den Mushi, or... wow, okay, I guess they call it the Snail-o-phone this time, and I think I like that even less than Telesnail. Either way, he answers it and finds himself on the line with Mr. Zero himself. Despite not being around during Vivi's initial information dump, Sanji has learned that Mr. Zero is Crocodile and shows off his own intelligence, piecing together the information accurately enough to understand the current situation. Then in his next considered move, he pretends to be Mr. 3 and informs Crocodile that everyone that knows his secret has been eliminated, and specifically tells him that he can call the hunt off. He doesn't lose his cool, he just calmly formulates a plan to get the crew out of immediate danger. Of course, things go a little pear-shaped when the unlucky show up and Sanji has to deal with them. Sanji beating up a woman confirmed, but I suppose animals don't count, and he tries to smooth things over with Crocodile. Now, it may have been outside of his expectations that Crocodile would be so unreasonably ruthless and unforgiving, but either way it works out in Sanji's favor as Crocodile then orders the execution of Mr. 3. Finally, Sanji succeeds in securing the Eternal Pose to Alabasta, a ticket off the island that they would have to have waited an entire year for. He may not have had as much page time as the rest of the crew, but in a few short pages, Sanji has shown a knack for subterfuge and intelligent and decisive action under pressure. Though, Embarrassingly, I misremembered, he doesn't actually take on his Mr. Prince moniker just yet. That's a different call with Crocodile. Either way, this call with Crocodile does do a couple more things. First, for the audience, we get an even better look at Sir Crocodile, lounging around with a giant banana alligator. He's got rings on his fingers, he's surrounded by finery, and is wearing a fine fur coat. We only get to clearly see one of his hands, and he's got a scar across his face. We're seeing someone that has wealth and influence, someone strong enough to keep a giant creature as a pet. We're seeing power not just in a physical sense, but in a social sense, as the head of a giant organization should have. And, most importantly, we get a hint at what are clearly his devil fruit abilities, as he drains a cup of water through a flower and then withers the flower to dust. The second most important thing is that this call is intercepted by White Chase Smoker, who, true to his name, has chased Luffy into the Grand Line, and he's now got a lead. He knows the Straw Hats are heading to Alabasta, and is heading there too. It's also a very interesting bit of information that the World Government/Navy headquarters has an eternal pose for Alabasta, which we can comfortably extrapolate to mean that they have both multiple poses for Alabasta, and more than likely, also have eternal poses for many of the islands on the Grand Line. This is how the Navy is able to circumvent the rules of the Grand Line that the Straw Hats have to follow on their adventure. We don't exactly know the relationship between the World Government and Alabasta just yet, but we'll find out soon enough. Also, Tashigi found another fine-grade sword. They really don't seem as rare as their introduction made them sound. And I guess they took it from a Baroque Works member they captured, Mr. 11. Finally, as the crew leave Little Garden and the arc reaches its conclusion, we turn back to Vivi. We've got one more thing to learn about her, and this time it's to see her thinking on something Igaram told her. Whatever sacrifices must be made, even if you betray others, you must live. It's an ominous line, one that begs the question, will Vivi need to betray the Straw Hats? Vivi is resolved to save her kingdom, is desperate to get there and stop the civil war, but would she betray others to do so? As we catch a look from the most wonderful Mr. 2, departing from Alabasta to fulfill his orders from the boss, we end the arc on a cliffhanger as Nami collapses from a fever, and there's no doctor in sight. So we better go find one. That means next time we land on Drum Island, explore our first winter island, and hear some very important things. It'll have to be another two-parter, so what do I start with? Chopper and Hiruluk, a man dying when he's forgotten? Or do I talk about royalty, Wapol and Vivi? I'll see which one tickles my fancy first. Did I miss anything else in Little Garden? The fact that Mr. 3 drinks quote-unquote English tea, implying the existence of England in the One Piece world? Let me know in the comments. We're one island away from Alabasta and I don't feel nearly prepared yet. Oh well, I'll do my best to make the best analysis I can for all of you, because it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.